my friend, who I'll call Alex to keep his name private, and I decided it was time to live together in a rented house. We'd been thinking about being roommates for some time since we both didn't want to stay with our parents. We were both going to a local college and working, so moving out seemed like the right thing to do next. We discovered this small but quite nice house, which was only a short 10-minute drive from our college. This was happening last year during the height of the COVID pandemic, so we had the chance to check the house by ourselves without a guide. The house seemed ideal for us. It wasn't the best, but it was affordable and perfect for our college days. It even had a pretty good backyard and wasn't too close to other houses. However, what really got our attention was this old, strange-looking shed in the backyard. It looked like any other shed, but it had a padlock on it. Interestingly, the shed wasn't mentioned in the house's online listing at all. Since we didn't plan on using the shed, we didn't think much of it and went ahead with renting the house. I was really excited about this new chapter, and I could see that Alex was too. A month later, we moved in, and the first week was fantastic. It was our first experience living by ourselves, so we loved the newfound independence. One Saturday night, while I was in the living room watching TV and waiting for Alex to return from his job, I heard something. It was only 7 p.m., and Alex was supposed to finish work at 8. Amidst the sound of the TV, I heard what sounded like a large door closing. It seemed to come from outside, and my first thought was that it was the shed. I had no intention of going outside alone to check it. When Alex came home, I immediately told him about the noise. He kept asking if I was sure it wasn't just a sound from the TV, but I was certain it wasn't. So we decided to investigate. We grabbed our phones, turned on the flashlights, and headed outside. Approaching the shed, about 20 feet away, everything seemed normal. The padlock was still in place, which meant nobody could have gone inside and then locked it from the outside. Alex gave me a look, probably thinking I was imagining things. We returned inside and continued watching TV, but I couldn't shake off the feeling about the noise I had heard earlier. I started doubting if the sound was even real. At one moment, while we were absorbed in the TV show, I glanced to the side and saw a shadowy figure standing outside the window, looking in. Alex didn't catch sight of him, but he did hear the sound of someone running away. So we were both convinced something odd was happening. Alex wondered what we should do, but honestly, we were clueless. We'd never encountered a situation like this. I wasn't even sure if this mysterious person was linked to the sound I heard before. For the next few hours, we were extra alert, listening and watching for anything unusual. Eventually, with no more strange incidents, we decided to go to bed. Falling asleep took a while, but I think I finally drifted off around 10 p.m. However, I woke up in the middle of the night to a weird, flickering red light reflecting off the walls in my room. The light was seeping through the blinds of my window. As I started to wake up more, I also heard a faint crackling noise coming from outside. I was still half asleep, my mind foggy. But then, Alex's voice echoed from the hallway, calling my name urgently. "Hey, wake up!" Before I could even ask what was wrong, I was startled by a loud and terrifying sound. Turning towards the window and throwing off my covers, I saw the shed outside engulfed in flames, collapsing to the ground. The fire was alarmingly close to our house. Alex immediately called 911, and we both rushed to his car, driving a safe distance away. The firefighters arrived quickly and managed to put out the fire before it caused serious damage. The side of our house suffered some minor burns. We informed the police about the strange occurrences and the man I saw, thinking he might be responsible. But there was no solid evidence. Everything inside the shed was reduced to ashes, except for a few old metal tools. This made us think someone might have been using the shed for something secretive, and perhaps set it on fire to destroy any evidence just as we moved in. The whole situation felt too coincidental. But I doubt we'll ever really find out what happened that night, or what secrets that shed held. When I turned 18, my two pals and I decided to share an apartment. We all had regular jobs and studied online. Splitting the rent 3 ways made it quite manageable. But as the year went by, one friend left, and suddenly there were just 2 of us to handle the expenses. We could still afford it, but it was tighter than before, and sometimes it really worried me. A few months later, my remaining friend also moved out. Their departure wasn't their fault, but it was a tough situation for me. I had to find a new place with just my modest earnings. There weren't many affordable options, but I was desperate for any place that could shelter me. Finally, I found an ad for a small apartment across town. The online photos showed a humble building with only 8 units, and the interior wasn't impressive. Yet the rent was within my budget, so I arranged to see it that evening. The landlord, Mr. Jackson, showed me around. The apartment was cramped and quite basic, but I had little choice. The next week I moved in. After settling in, I realized the place wasn't too bad. It was a bit dingy and old, but it had everything necessary for living. There was one odd thing though, a mysterious door in the hallway opposite my room. It looked like it could lead to another room, but Mr. Jackson explained during the tour that it was a shared door with the neighboring apartment, always locked from both sides. He told me to think of it as a wall. However, I always wondered if the neighbors could hear me, and I felt I needed to be extra quiet not to disturb them. The door seemed thin, likely letting sound pass through easily, but for the first week I never heard a sound from the other side. One night, after coming home late from work, I was watching TV when a loud thud came from the hallway. I checked my room, thinking something had fallen, but then I saw light moving under the neighbor's door, like a flashlight. Curious, I listened for a bit, not wanting to be nosy, but wondering what was happening. This was the first time I'd heard anything from that side. The light soon went off, and the noise stopped. I returned to the couch and stayed up a bit longer before heading to bed. Throughout those nights, I kept waking up to hear strange sounds from the door across the hall. They were mostly soft noises, like bumps or steps, always happening in the dead of night. It was odd because there was never any talking, just these sounds. I'd lay there, feeling a bit spooked, but never brave enough to go see what was happening. Then, one night, everything changed. A really loud bang jolted me awake. It was so much louder than anything before. I sat up, heart racing, staring at my door. That noise made me feel really scared, like something was wrong. I got out of bed super quietly and tiptoed to my door. I listened for a bit. Nothing, just silence. I opened my door slowly and saw something that made me freeze. The door across the hall was ajar. I wasn't sure what to do, but I crept out and peeked inside. The room was just a tiny bedroom with a mattress on the floor and no other doors. It was a dead-end room. The only way in or out was through my apartment. I quickly grabbed my phone and called the police, checking my apartment to make sure no one else was there. Whoever had been in that room was gone. The police came and looked around, but we couldn't get hold of Jackson, the landlord. We started to think Jackson wasn't even his real name, and he vanished after that. The whole thing about that room remains a mystery. Maybe it was Jackson, or whoever he was, hiding in there. Or maybe someone else was trapped and finally escaped. Whatever it was, I never found out the full story. Let me tell you a story, but don't expect it to be super exciting. It's actually quite creepy, and it's about something weird that happened in my own house. So, this took place a year back. I had just finished college and landed a job that paid me for doing what I studied, fixing computers. I've always been into computers, ever since I was little. The pay was good, especially with prices going up everywhere. I was really thankful for this job. But the hours were tough. I had to start work at 11 at night and keep at it until 3 in the morning. Every time I got home, I was super tired. I was renting a small place with just one bedroom. I could afford it on my own. But my parents were so proud of me for getting this job, they offered to pay half the rent. One night I was at work halfway through my shift when my boss calls. He says we're shutting down for the night because there might be a big storm coming. So I had to pack up and head home early. I was really worn out and fell asleep right away, even though it was raining hard outside. I think I slept for around 3 hours, and then something woke me up. It was a noise in my room, kind of like knocking, but quicker and sharper. I looked at the clock. It was 4:07 a.m., and it was still raining heavily outside. I thought the noise was just hail hitting the roof, so I tried to sleep again. But then, the noise came back, louder this time. It freaked me out. It sounded like it was coming from inside my wall. I live near some woods, so I thought maybe an animal got inside the wall somehow. I got out of bed, slipped on my slippers, and pressed my ear against the wall to listen. It was quiet at first, but then there was a really loud knock that made me jump back. Just then, lightning flashed outside and I saw what looked like eyes staring at me through the air vent. The face was really pale, with no eyebrows. That's all I could see before it disappeared back into the wall. I was so scared, I ran out of my house and called the police. The cops in my town are really good at their job, so they got there fast. One stayed with me while the other checked the wall. He said it was too small for a person to fit through. I even helped take apart the wall to see, and he was right. But when we shined a light inside, everything looked normal. I thanked the cops and they left. Then I tried to call my parents to tell them what happened, but they didn't want to listen. They thought I was just having a nightmare. I used to have nightmares as a kid, but it's rare now. The next day I bought some drywall to fix the wall. I've never believed in ghosts or anything, but I can't explain what I saw. Nothing weird has happened since then, and I hope it stays that way. The story began in the cold start of winter, when I had to move for my job. It was a big move, and I didn't have a choice if I wanted to keep my job. They were sending me to a new place far away, in a state I'd never been to. It was a small town, quite a distance from any city, with a big warehouse where I was going to work. I couldn't visit the town before moving, so I had to rent a place without seeing it first. In this small town, there weren't many houses to choose from. I wasn't sure about the place I picked, but I hoped it would be okay. Finally, the day came to move. I left my old home and drove for 2 days to reach the new town. Driving through the town's streets, I felt like a fish out of water. I was used to city life, and this town was the smallest I'd ever seen. Most of the houses were old, from the early 1900s, and my new neighborhood had a mix of old and somewhat newer houses. My house was one of the newer ones. I parked on the street and walked up to my new home, passing a big shipping container with my belongings. I unlocked the front door with the key from an envelope and stepped inside for the first time. Empty houses can be deceiving, and this one looked worse than its pictures. The walls had cracks, and the ceiling had water stains, things not shown in the online photos. The rooms were small, but it seemed like this was probably one of the better houses in the town. After a quick look around, I went back to my car to grab an air mattress and a couple of backpacks. It was very late, and I didn't want to start unpacking until morning. I decided to set up the air mattress in the living room. Sleeping in an empty bedroom didn't feel right, so the living room was my choice. I turned off the lights and tried to sleep. Despite being exhausted, I couldn't get comfortable. After about half an hour of tossing and turning, a knock at the front door jolted me awake. I glanced at the door, then checked the time on my phone. 1 a.m. It was too late for visitors. I quietly approached the door and peered through the peephole. 2 mysterious men were standing on my porch in the darkness. They looked ordinary, but their presence at such a late hour was unsettling. I watched them silently from behind the door, hoping they would leave soon. They knocked again, but didn't seem to be in a hurry to leave. I was puzzled about what they could want at this late hour, and couldn't think of any good reason for their visit. After about 30 seconds, one of them finally turned and walked away, with the other following. Once they were gone, I sat back down, trying to make sense of their visit, but fatigue overtook me, and I fell asleep. I woke up later, not sure how much time had passed. Half asleep, I heard a soft, prolonged creaking sound from somewhere in the house. Startled and on edge, I quickly got up and switched on the light. Not knowing if the house was just settling or if it was something else, I cautiously made my way to the room where I thought I'd heard the noise. At first glance, the room appeared normal, empty, but then I noticed a small gap in the window frame. It was slightly open. I felt a wave of unease as I hurriedly closed and locked it, not sure if it had been like that before. With my mind racing, I checked every window and door in the house. As I was inspecting the upstairs rooms, I noticed a lone, scuffed shoe print in the middle of the hallway. My heart sank. Thankfully, there was no one else in the house, but the thought of someone having been there was horrifying. The police arrived quickly after my call and confirmed that it was very likely someone had entered through a downstairs window that night. The realization that 1 or 2 people had entered through a window and walked through the entire house Possibly reaching the upstairs while I was asleep in the living room was terrifying. I couldn't help but wonder what their intentions were, especially considering the two men on my porch earlier. I still live in the same house, but I haven't experienced anything strange since that first unsettling night. My rental contract was about to expire, and the house's owners decided to sell it after my lease ended. This meant I had to look for a new place instead of staying on. It was a real hassle because they only told me 1 month in advance, which isn't much time to find a new home. Having a full-time job made it even more difficult. The first 2 weeks went by in a blur, leaving me just 2 more weeks to find a place, pack up, and move. I was incredibly stressed. With little time left, I quickly applied for 3 nearby houses without even visiting them first. 2 rejected my application, but the third one accepted me. The house didn't look as good as my current one in the photos, but I had to make do with the tough situation. I hired a moving truck and moved my belongings as soon as I could. Once I moved all my boxes and furniture in, I finally got a good look at the house. It was in worse shape than the photos showed. The walls were peeling, and everything seemed old and worn. The rent was low, but it didn't make up for how run down the house was. Exhausted, I didn't bother fixing anything and just set up my bed for a quick nap. I ended up sleeping longer than planned and woke up refreshed at 9 p.m. I checked my phone and saw a message from my landlord, just saying hello and offering help if needed. But it was late, so I decided to wait until the next day to express my frustration. I put my phone down and headed to the kitchen to make some food. As I entered, I was startled to see a man standing in the living room staring at me. Muttering to myself, I wondered what he was doing there. I couldn't see his face well in the dark, and he had a blank expression. I asked him why he was in my house. Without saying a word, the man walked out the front door calmly. My first reaction was to lock the door. I tried calling my landlord, but he didn't answer. Peering out the windows, I couldn't see the man anymore. I thought about calling the police, but the whole thing was so strange and not really threatening. After watching for a while and seeing no one, I sat down on the couch. I hadn't set up my TV, so I decided to unpack. After sorting through 4 boxes, I was on the 5th when I heard a knock at the door. I approached carefully, turned on the porch light, and asked who was there. After waiting a bit, I heard a voice say, "It's me, your landlord." I cautiously opened the door slightly to see him. He resembled the man I had seen in my house earlier, but I couldn't be certain. "Hello? Did you need something?" I asked. He replied cheerfully, resting his hand on the doorframe. "Just checking to see if you're settling in okay?" I responded, "Yes, I was about to head to bed. We can talk tomorrow." As I tried to close the door, he kept his hand there, preventing me from shutting it. I paused, and then a wave of fear and unease hit me. I forcefully pushed the door closed, catching him off guard, and quickly locked it. I heard him trying the handle and then banging on the door. Eventually, he ran off the porch. I immediately called the police and grabbed my car keys, ready to leave quickly if necessary. Standing near the front door, I soon heard rustling around the house. The noise stopped near the back door. Cautiously, I peeked around the corner and saw the same man standing there with a hammer. Seizing the opportunity, I dashed to my car in the driveway. I locked myself in, reversed out, and noticed the man watching me as I drove off. When the police arrived, the man was gone. During their investigation, I met the actual landlord. He wasn't the man at my door, but they looked and spoke quite similarly. This made me wonder if they were related, perhaps brothers. I also considered the possibility of a weird neighbor or a homeless person. Regardless, I never saw that man again. But as soon as my lease ended, I moved out without a second thought. After finishing school, I lived with my older brother Tom for about 4 years. We shared an apartment because it was too expensive for either of us to live alone. But in our 4th year there, Tom started earning more money. He planned to leave when our lease ended. I didn't earn much, so I couldn't pay for the apartment by myself. I looked online for a new roommate for a while, but then decided to find a cheaper place instead. I kept searching for a new place until the last month of our lease. Tom had already moved most of his stuff out, and I felt a lot of pressure to find a new home quickly. My limited budget made this difficult. Finally, I found an ad from someone named Evan who was renting a room in his house. I texted Evan to say I was interested and kept looking for other places. He texted back quickly, and we arranged to talk on the phone later. When we spoke, he told me he lived alone and was renting his extra room. He said I could use the rest of the house too. It sounded good to me, so I agreed to move in. A couple of weeks later, I packed all my things into a U-Haul and drove to Evan's house. We had been texting and talking on the phone, and he had sent me photos of the house, but I hadn't seen it in person yet. I arrived around noon and parked in the driveway. The house was small but nice. Evan was in the garage and waved at me. He showed me around quickly and helped me move my things into my room. Evan was a quiet man in his mid-30s, about 10 years older than me. He wasn't much of a talker and seemed a bit shy. After we finished moving my stuff, I returned the U-Haul and took an Uber back to the house. By then it was almost 8 p.m., and I was really tired. Evan was watching TV in the living room. I told him I was going to sleep early and went to my room. Overall, the place seemed good, and I was happy with it. I unpacked a bit more and set up my bed. By 9 p.m., I was all set to go to bed. I went to lock my door and switch off the lights, but I realized there was no lock on my side of the door. Confused, I opened my door and saw the lock was on the outside. I walked to the living room and asked Evan about the lock. He seemed surprised and said he hadn't noticed, but promised to fix it the next day. I just nodded and went back to my room, feeling a bit weird about it, but too tired to worry much. I got into bed and soon fell asleep. In the middle of the night, I woke up to the sound of someone in the kitchen, probably Evan. But then, as he walked past my room, he stopped. I looked at the door and saw him standing there silently for a few seconds. Then I heard a click. He had locked my door from the outside. I felt a wave of fear, realizing this man I hardly knew had just locked me in. After hearing him go to his room, I got up and tried the door. It was definitely locked. I was shocked and scared. But then I got angry. I shouted for Evan to open the door. He came running and hesitated a moment before unlocking it. I opened the door immediately, demanding to know why he locked me in. Evan was flustered, saying he wanted to feel safe because he didn't really know me. I got that, but locking me in wasn't okay. I told him I was leaving in the morning and spent the night on the couch, waiting for the U-Haul place to open. At 9 a.m., I saw Evan's door was still shut, so I assumed he was asleep. I went straight to get the U-Haul. When I came back, Evan's bedroom door was open. "Evan?" I called out, walking towards his room. I peeked inside only to find it empty, which only made things feel stranger. Determined to leave quickly, I spent the next 2 hours moving boxes and dismantling my bed. With only 2 boxes left, I rushed back inside for another one and headed for the front door, but Evan was blocking the way. "Move," I said firmly. He just looked at me, showing no emotion. After a pause, he stepped aside, and I hurried past him, putting the box in the U-Haul. The last box, half filled with random pantry items, seemed unimportant, so I decided to leave it behind. I was eager to get away from Evan and his unsettling behavior. As I was closing the U-Haul, Evan interrupted, offering the last box. "Oh, right, thanks," I said, taking it and climbing back into the truck. I felt his eyes on me as I placed the box inside. Turning around, I saw him holding the truck door, beginning to pull it down as if to trap me inside. I reacted quickly, stopping him before the door was halfway down. Pushing him away, he fell to the ground, but then got up and ran, not into the house, but towards the trees. I didn't stop to think about it. I just closed the truck and drove off. My brother Tom let me stay with him while I looked for a new place. I still don't understand what was going on in that house, or what might have happened if I'd stayed, but it was clear something was very wrong. When I was around 15 years old, we moved to a newly built house. It was a beautiful 2-story building with 3 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, and a basement. Basements are common, but it was unusual to find one in houses in our area. At that time, my parents had jobs in the healthcare sector. They were very busy, especially since this was during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. They were often away at work, helping patients. I was mostly at home due to the pandemic, and we were all worried about the risk of catching the virus. I'll skip over the less important parts and get right to the story. This happened in late July, during the summer. My parents were at work, as usual. I was at home, playing online games with my friends. We were having a great time, and being 15 and alone at home, I felt pretty free. We had been playing for around an hour when suddenly the phone rang. This was odd because we hardly ever received phone calls. The calls we did get were usually from my dad. He had told me not to answer the phone to avoid scammers, which made sense. So I ignored it and continued playing, letting it go to voicemail. Strangely, the phone rang again almost immediately, and my online friends suggested I should answer it, thinking it might be important. I went to the phone and answered it. As soon as I did, I could hear a man's heavy breathing. I kept saying hello, but there was no reply, just the continuous sound of breathing. After I hung up the phone, I tried to focus on my game, but the phone rang again. Annoyed, I picked it up and asked who it was. The voice on the other end said something chilling. "I'm just waiting for you to come downstairs, Danny." I froze. The voice was too deep to be any of my friends or anyone I knew. Hours later, my parents got home, and I told them about the call. My dad, who's always been brave, searched the house. He found our other phone on the kitchen floor in a broken window. My dad called the police, but for a long time, they couldn't find any clues about who was in our house that night. However, the police did figure out that the call came from California. We live in Indiana and don't know anyone from California. Update: September 14th, 2022. We got news from the police about the intruder. It turned out he was a homeless man who had broken into another family's house. In that incident, the parents were out, and their daughter was home alone. The man got in through an open window and went upstairs. I won't go into details, but it was a terrible situation. This man had been doing things like this for months, often targeting children or anyone he saw as an easy target. Thankfully, he was caught and put in jail. That's all the information we have for now. I was 19 when this strange thing happened, about a year back. Living with my folks, being their only kid. We'd always been in this same, pretty ordinary house and neighborhood. But right after I wrapped up high school, my mom and dad decided we should move. This new place was a couple hours drive away, more of a small town vibe than a city one. They'd been talking about moving for a while, so it wasn't exactly a shock, but leaving my familiar surroundings felt really weird. Plus, the new house was way different, still in a neighborhood but with loads of land around it. Instead of houses packed close together, each one was separated by acres of woods. So, a few weeks after we settled in, my parents took off for their annual business trip, flying way across the country and leaving me to look after the house. I was old enough, sure, but being alone in this new, unfamiliar place felt a bit creepy. And it was summer, so no school or anything to keep me busy. The first day dragged on as I tried to entertain myself with YouTube and Netflix, but soon ran out of stuff to watch. The next day, I decided to sit outside on our porch chairs for a bit. Before long, I spotted a guy standing near our driveway, which was pretty long, so he wasn't super close to the house. He was kind of hidden in the trees, staring in my direction. I waved, thinking maybe he was a neighbor, but he quickly looked away, trying to act like he wasn't watching me. Weird, right? But he walked off, and after a few minutes of waiting to see if he'd come back, I went back inside. I didn't dwell on it too much, just spent the rest of the day gaming and made myself a frozen dinner. That night, I stayed up pretty late, probably till around 1 or 2 a.m., then headed to bed. Like the night before, I couldn't fall asleep right away and just lay there with my eyes shut for what felt like an hour. Right when I was on the edge of sleep, I heard something from downstairs. Footsteps, faint but clear, walking onto the porch. I opened my eyes, listening hard. Then came a quiet click, followed by the long, slow creak of our front door opening. Frozen with fear, I lay there, not sure what to do next. The footsteps moved inside, quietly creeping through the downstairs hallway. I silently got out of bed, locked my bedroom door, and then hid in the corner behind my bed frame. The person tiptoed around the lower level, almost silent. Then, everything went quiet for what seemed like forever, until I heard the stairs start to creak. The sounds got closer, reaching the top of the staircase. My heart was racing as I watched the shadow of someone stop right outside my door. They stayed there, probably listening for any noise from me, for a whole minute. Then they walked away, heading down the hall toward my parents' bedroom. I didn't hear the door open, so I guess they just stood outside, listening again. After a bit, they came back toward my room. I saw their shadow pass by my door. Then the footsteps went back down the stairs, faster this time. They left through the front door, and then there was silence. I stayed hidden in my room for like 30 minutes, scared it might be a trick, and they were still inside. But when I finally got brave enough to go downstairs, the front door was wide open, and the house was empty. I called the police and my parents right away. They didn't find much though. No one knows how the person got the door open, but we changed the locks and added extra security after that. I'm not sure if the person I saw earlier that day was the same one who broke in, or if it was someone else. We don't know what they wanted either. My parents think maybe the intruder thought they were home since the master bedroom door was closed, and got scared off from doing whatever they planned, but we'll probably never really know for sure. I recently moved to a different part of the state, into a house that was just built. My old house owner decided to sell the place where I lived before. When our rental contract ended, he asked me to leave. I chose to rent this new house, and I was actually quite excited about it. Right after I settled in, I started noticing my neighbor from across the street. He was an older man and seemed to always be at home. At first, I thought he was just curious about me being new in the area. But the more I saw him, the stranger it felt. He never talked to anyone, never smiled, and always stayed inside his house watching. Sometimes I saw him from my window standing in his yard late at night. It was beginning to scare me. One night, as I was getting ready to sleep, I heard a sound outside. It sounded like someone pulling something heavy on the ground. I looked out and saw my neighbor moving a big ladder across his yard. It was very late at night, and I couldn't understand why he would be working outside at that hour. I tried to convince myself I was just being overly worried because everything around me was new, but I couldn't stop thinking that there was something wrong with my neighbor. I tried to relax and eventually fell asleep. The next morning he was there again. This time, he was standing at the end of my driveway, looking at me through my window. I quickly closed the curtain and tried to ignore him, but the idea of him watching me was really unsettling. I didn't like him being so close to my driveway, so I hurriedly got into my car and left the garage. He had returned to his yard by then, but he kept his eyes on me as I drove off. Things started to get much worse after this. One night as I was in bed, I distinctly heard the sound of someone walking on the grass in my fenced backyard. I got up to check, but as soon as I reached the window, the footsteps stopped. I waited in bed for around half an hour, but there was no more sound. I decided to check the window again, just to be sure, and saw a shadowy figure standing far back in the yard. It was too dark to see clearly, but someone was definitely there, watching me. I moved away from the window and called the police, but by the time they arrived, the person had vanished. I explained about my unsettling neighbor, but the police said there was no proof of any crime and that my neighbor had a clean record. So, I was left to deal with the situation on my own. I began to be extra careful, always locking my doors and windows and staying inside as much as I could. Still, I didn't feel safe. After nearly 2 weeks in the new house, I even thought about breaking my rental agreement. Then something else happened. I came back from work late one evening and went to bed almost immediately. In the middle of the night, I was startled awake by a loud thump against the house, right outside my bedroom on the second floor. My heart pounding, I cautiously pulled back the curtains. To my horror, I saw my neighbor's face just inches away from my window. He was on a ladder, trying to peer into my room. He quickly climbed down and ran off when he saw me. I called the police again, and this time they caught him as he was taking down the ladder. Though he didn't confess, it was clear what he was up to. A few days later, another neighbor visited me and shared their own strange experiences with this man. They recounted seeing him peering into their windows as they returned from work. I couldn't help but wonder if they had reported him earlier. Maybe I could have been spared this ordeal. But at least now, it seemed like it was all over. Last year, during the chilly winter season, I made the big move into my very first purchased home. It was a dream come true, a lovely large house with an expansive backyard. However, the process of moving in was challenging, especially since I was on my own, shouldering the entire task of relocating my belongings. I arrived early in the morning with the moving truck, only to find the driveway blanketed in snow. Determinedly, I cleared the snow away and began the laborious process of carrying all my boxes and pieces of furniture inside. This task stretched on until late evening, around the time most people have dinner. After securing the truck and planning to return it the next day, I spent a quiet night in my new home. Without a bed to sleep in, I settled on the downstairs couch with just my phone for company. Sleeping on the couch wasn't exactly comfortable, but it was when I was drifting off that I heard an odd sound. It seemed like someone was approaching my porch. Startled, I sat up, straining my ears and eyes toward the front door, but the noise ceased just before anyone could have reached it. Eventually, I convinced myself it was nothing and fell asleep. In the morning, I discovered the front door unlocked, which was odd since I was sure I had locked it before heading to bed. After a quick inspection outside for any signs of a visitor and finding none, I continued my day, occupied with the task of unpacking and arranging my furniture. By evening, most of it was in place. After stepping out for a quick dinner at 6 p.m. and returning around 7 p.m., something unusual caught my eye in the snow near my home. Footprints led directly to my front door. I investigated, following the tracks to their end at the cleared sidewalk, puzzled and a bit uneasy. To calm my nerves, I rationalized that it might have been a neighbor dropping by to greet me, although no one had knocked or made their presence known. After finishing all the unpacking in my new house, I developed a habit of double-checking all the doors and windows each night before heading to bed. On one particular evening, I was puzzled to find the front door unlocked again. I tested the lock with my key, ensuring it was functioning correctly. It was baffling because I was certain I had kept it locked throughout the day. The situation was perplexing and slightly unnerving. There were no obvious signs of an intruder, and nothing was amiss inside the house. Considering the snowy and wet conditions outside, any unwanted visitor would have surely left water-soaked footprints across the floor. Confident that the door was securely locked this time, I went upstairs to my bedroom, intending to take a shower before bed. However, as I stepped out of the shower, a faint, indistinct noise from downstairs caught my attention. Normally, I would dismiss such sounds, but given the recent unsettling events, I felt compelled to investigate. Dressed and cautious, I descended the stairs. To my shock, there stood a man in the hallway, motionless, with the front door open behind him. I was rooted to the spot in fear, and after a frozen moment, I turned and dashed back upstairs, locking myself in my bedroom. Though I didn't hear the stranger follow me, the sound of footsteps moving around the lower level of the house filled me with dread. Seizing the opportunity, I quickly called the police while the intruder roamed downstairs. After a tense couple of minutes, the sound of the front door slamming shut and the footsteps retreating brought a temporary relief. The police arrived but found no helpful clues. They advised installing security cameras and changing the door locks, which I promptly did. However, the man never returned, leaving me in a constant state of apprehension, always half expecting, half fearing his reappearance. I remain unsure of the intruder's intentions or what he might have planned, and a part of me wishes I never find out. I am a 30-year-old woman, and this story happened in the late part of last year, around early November. My partner and I had recently purchased a boat business in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. At that time, we were living in Los Angeles. Since we became the new owners of the business, it was necessary for us to move to Florida to take care of it. Life in Florida was pretty much as you would expect. There was a lot of rain, and it felt almost like a tropical place, especially during the summer. For those who have been to Florida or live there, you might understand what I mean. We moved into a big one-story house that was perfect for a family of 4. Although we didn't have children, the house was affordable, and we were in need of a new place to live. For the first few weeks after moving, everything was going smoothly, and we were getting used to our new surroundings. Basically, things were looking up for us. Then one day when my partner went to the office, I stayed home because I was sick with the flu. I remember at one point, I went to the kitchen to grab something to eat, to keep something in my stomach. When I walked into the kitchen, which still had many unopened boxes, I suddenly felt something odd. It wasn't exactly a scary feeling, more like something that made me very aware of my surroundings. It was similar to that sensation you get when you feel like someone is watching you. I felt that very strongly. I then looked through the sliding glass door and saw a person walking through my vegetable garden. They appeared to be a young adult, dressed entirely in black and carrying a satchel. Our house had a side gate that could only be opened with a password, but the password system wasn't working, which made me think that this person must have climbed over the fence. Continuing from where the story left off, I noticed the stranger in my garden seemed to be spreading something around. My first thought was to call my partner, but I knew he would be overly worried and might try to handle it himself. With no better options, I decided to call the police. The person on the phone told me they would send someone as soon as they could and advised me to stay out of sight until then. Meanwhile, the stranger kept moving around the garden. I rushed to my bedroom, locked the door, and sat on my bed, silently hoping that he wouldn't try to enter the house. It felt like a very long time, but finally, I heard the sound of police sirens approaching. They grew louder until they reached my house, and I heard noises outside. When I finally went out, I saw 4 police officers holding down a young guy who looked like he was in his late teens. He didn't resist much, almost as if he had accepted his fate. Talking with the police, I found out something astonishing. They had discovered that he was spreading liquid mercury in our garden. I immediately called my partner, and he had to leave his work to come back home. It turned out that the teenager was the son of our neighbors. His parents were very sorry and kept apologizing for what he had done. We felt sorry for them too, but we still pressed charges against their son for what could have been an attempt on our lives. We had no idea how he got hold of mercury. I'm just grateful I saw him when I did. If I hadn't, I might not be here to tell this story. The boy was arrested and, according to his parents, sentenced to 10 years in prison. Later that day, his parents insisted that their son was innocent and was just looking at our garden. But neither my partner nor I wanted to listen to that. This was my first time buying a house. At 28, I was ready to find a permanent place to live. 5 months before my rental agreement was up, I started looking for houses. I stumbled upon a great house, but it was way too expensive. So I had to keep looking. I saw many houses and even thought I found the right one. But then that same expensive house popped up again in my search, now at a much lower price. It was now affordable for me. I visited the house and eventually decided to buy it. I was over the moon. It felt like a big step in my life. The house was 2 stories high, had a basement, and a big yard with lots of trees. The only small problem was that it was 20 minutes from most stores, but since I worked from home, it wasn't a big deal. However, within the first few days, odd things began to happen. One day, while working in the living room, I heard noises from the basement, like something being dragged. I went to check, but as soon as I opened the door, the noise stopped. It was quiet. I turned on the light and went partway down the stairs, but saw nothing. There were only a few boxes and the house's heating and cooling systems down there. I had just moved in, so I thought maybe I was just not used to the house's sounds. But the next day, I heard it again. This time a dull thud, like wood hitting a wall. I went all the way down to the basement and looked around, but there was nothing. Still, I didn't think much of it. What could it be? I didn't believe in ghosts or anything like that, so I figured it was just the house. During my first week, I heard these sounds about 6 or 7 times. By the 4th or 5th time, I stopped going to check and started ignoring it. That changed when I was walking around outside the house. I was enjoying the nature around my house when I noticed that one of the small windows at the top of the basement was uncovered. After finding the missing cover on the basement window, I knew I had to fix it before rain caused any flooding. I quickly bought a new cover from a local store and put it on the same day. That evening, I decided to sleep early, but was startled awake at 11 p.m. by a loud noise from the basement, right under my bedroom. It sounded like a heavy thud, followed by what seemed like footsteps moving across the basement. I was terrified. Part of me was sure someone was down there, but another part wondered if I was just imagining things or if it was another house noise. I had to find out. Taking the bat from my bedroom, I cautiously made my way to the basement door. As I got closer, there was a loud bang from outside the house. I froze, listening for any other sound, then slowly opened the basement door and went down. The basement was as empty as always. I looked around thoroughly, even waiting in silence, hoping to hear the noise again. But like before, as soon as I checked, everything went quiet. Feeling really uneasy, I went back upstairs and placed a chair in front of the basement door, just in case someone was actually down there. The next morning, something was off. The basement was unusually bright. I checked the window and saw that the new cover I had installed was gone, just like the first one. I searched outside but couldn't find it. This was enough for me to call the police. An officer came, listened to my story, and checked the basement, but found nothing unusual. I replaced the window cover again, and this time hired someone to install bars on the inside of the window. After that, there were no more strange noises or occurrences. I still don't know if there was someone in my basement or if it was something else. 3 years later, the memory of those sounds still lingers in my mind.